Alright guys, welcome to my Scuffed Deadlock podcast. I have spent hours configuring OBS, kind of deciding what type of podcast I want this to be, and it's going to change over time. So thanks for bearing with me as I work out the kinks and go through these growing pains, right? Let me know in the comments if you have any recommendations. Honestly, let me know what you want to see and I will seriously consider it. Ideally, I'm kind of looking at doing a lot of educational content, bringing in the best information from different coaches, pro players, different sources that I can find and compiling it here so people can work on their game, maybe get some laughs at some silly clips, some entertainment type things, and also just general podcasts, general Deadlock news as it comes out and this game evolves in this new stage of the game. So myself, I come from lots of different games. I've played my fair share of shooters like Counter-Strike, for example, but also a ridiculous amount of League of Legends, and it's been pretty fun meshing those two types of games and playing it in Deadlock. I've been having a blast. I hope you guys are enjoying it too. You must be to be watching a podcast on it. And yeah, let's get going here. One thing about Deadlock, and I guess from what I've heard, you can tell me if I'm right and what I've heard is correct or not, but apparently Steam games in general, or maybe it was Valve games, are known for being very malleable. They let their player base modify and kind of do whatever they want when it comes to changing things in game, editing things, creating their own content. So harkening back to Counter-Strike, for example, people would make their own custom maps and create surfing, which is a whole, game within itself in Counter-Strike, for example. It kind of seems like maybe Deadlock will be going down that route too, or maybe it's just that it's in an alpha state. It's not fully released yet, so we'll see what happens when the game fully comes out. But people have already found out how to, well, for one, you can change the background, the menu background when you open the game, which I have a video that you can check out on my channel. But also people are making their own skins. Now, I don't know if Valve condones this or really cares. Of course, the skins, only you can see the skins. It's not like you're going to change your skin and then other people are going to see them, right? Because people would just make skins that are really hard to see, so it's unfair, or things that are wildly inappropriate. I'll leave that up to your imagination, but let's see here. So I found this in the Deadlock community in the Steam client. You can do this yourself, of course, but this is actually a cool little place to go. There's a lot of just garbage here, just people spouting off, but sometimes there's some cool things to check out. So where did it go? Here it is. How to add all new skins. This is by Orp. So shout out to Orp, I guess. Wait a minute. Okay, this is the one. So I'm not going to go through this, detail by detail on how to do it. You can do that yourself. It's right here. There's a bunch of steps, obviously. But basically involves going into your directory, download the skin files from whoever created it, and then you just swap it out for what the game has in the Steam directory. And then that's about it. As far as safety goes, I'm use at your own risk. I'm not saying you should do this, but it exists. Some of them are pretty interesting. It is early though, so we'll see what comes out, you know, down the line, if people are still able to do this, you know, years from now, cross your fingers if Deadlock is still thriving, and I really hope it is. So guys, keep playing Deadlock and keep the enthusiasm like alive. Invite your friends, because I love this game, and I want it to be still going, so I have a reason to do things like this and make content for fun. I'd still play it anyway, but anyways, so this is actually the best one on the list, and in my opinion, it's the most detailed. It's Space Marine Abrams. So they changed Abrams to Space Marine. You can see the guy's got some good detail going on in here compared to the other skins. Like, this is actually pretty nice. I bet they spent a good amount of time on this, I'd have to guess. I have no idea. So I'm going to show you a clip of the skin being used in game, and after this here in a second. They also made this, like, you know, Abrams, just changed the colors a little bit. And then this is kind of cool. It's like, you know, Cow Abrams. Looks a little bit like Alistar from League of Legends. And let's see. I draw acid into his... Oh, they just made his lips bigger? So that's kind of silly. Here we have... What is this guy? Is this like a Gundam or something? Let me know. I'm sure there's some like anime fans out there or something who know exactly what this is, but pretty cool. You know, you got Infernus. This is the Scout from Team Fortress 2. Looks just like him. Nice work. Of course, this one's making waves. You might have seen some like clips of this in your feed, you know. For all those thirsty guys out there, you can get a bikini Vindicta. Yeah, it's a little bikini Vindictas. So there you go. Vindicta with like tennis shoes. Bald Vindicta with tennis shoes. You know, let's see. Interesting 7. I kind of do like this one here. It's like a old school, what do you call it? Low poly 7. That's cool. It just reminds me of like the good old days, you know? This is cool too. 7 in the style of Neon Prime. Again, I don't know this reference, but this looks pretty cool. Looks kind of like, is it like steampunk or something? Like, I honestly have no idea. Yeah, you got like Bald Shiv, or who is this supposed to be? Oh, it's just Bald Shiv. I thought that for a second that was like, it kind of looks like Jason Statham. Yeah, Halloween Pumpkin, Viscous. This is kind of a cool, just white Viscous. I'll check this out. You got a cat. You got a cat in there. Pretty rad. Pretty rad. Yeah, construction worker Kelvin. Again, Team Fortress 2, the engineer. Looks pretty solid, honestly. Yeah, so I'll just kind of go through these here. You can check them out yourself too in the client. Oh, Krill and Mo. That's clever. I like that. It's a little Krill riding Mo. Nice. Silliness. Yeah. This kind of segues into like, I was trying to do some research on like, is Valve going to monetize off of making skins and selling them to the public, which you'd have to imagine 100,000% yes, they're going to do that, or something similar. I mean, probably skins. If not skins, at least like gun skins, or maybe they're going to have like little charms that you can add to your characters. It's possible they could do like, I don't know, you could like map alterations. Like you sometimes in games you can buy stuff that will alter like the base in your map just to kind of glow it up a little bit. Yeah, So we'll see how that all turns out down the line. That's about the last of these. But just wanted to, show you that this is out there. We'll see where it goes. I didn't do this personally because, number one, I'm sure it's probably safe. I don't know. Who's to say that all of this just goes away in the next patch and it won't be allowed anymore? And then I have to worry about going back into my game and changing the files again. Just sounds like kind of a headache to me. But I'm glad people are out there having fun doing this. Okay. So let's go ahead and check out. So here's a clip of them using the Space Marine. This one also has unique voice lines too, as you can hear, which is pretty sweet. He probably just ripped them straight from Space Marine, I'm guessing. But yeah, it's like a fully functional skin, which is pretty rad. So yeah, shout out to this creator. And also I wanted to show you a little bit of this Vindicta here, Bikini Vindicta.
Went through his spirit shield.
Pretty ridiculous.
Wait, do I still have my escalating stacks on him?
Hello.
Little distracting.
Thank you.
To each their own, Alright. So next, I wanted to so my goal is to get some top of the line, educational stuff for serious players, not like beginner, newbie stuff that people could get anywhere, but information that's actually very useful, maybe harder to find. So down the line in future podcasts, if I keep this going, I'm definitely going to be getting that to you. Ideally finding clips of really professional coach sessions, and them analyzing very intricate minutia of the game, the things that are kind of hard to pick up on your own. I think are really interesting. It'd be cool to offer you guys a place for people really just to geek out and analyze, just get down to the detail, the nitty gritty. But for now, I got a couple things here. All that stuff will come out, as the game ages and more content is released and all of that. I'll be looking to ideally bring on some different coaches onto the podcast and have them, speak and talk and get some information out. This is one topic here. I'm just going to play this here for you guys.
But I want to discuss the difference between 5v5 and 6v6. So in League of Legends and in Dota, most modern day MOBAs, it is a 5v5 game mode. And in Deadlock, it's very unique because it's 6v6. This is actually one of the reasons why I don't like Deadlock well, I love Deadlock, but I don't like the 6v6 nature of this because it's very different than what League of Legends is. So in League of Legends, the individual compared to 6v6 mode, right, has way more impact because it's a 5v5, right? In League of Legends, at most, you 1v5. And this happens very often. You can easily do this. In Deadlock, you have to 1v6 at most, right? And yes, you can still 1v6 in Deadlock, whatever. But fighting 6 people versus fighting 5 people, it's a lot harder for the individual to, win a 1v6 than it is a 1v5, right? It's very simple. So Deadlock is a very unique game because instead of 5 players, you have 6 players. And what that means is making sure your team is healthy, making sure all your team is strong through roaming, through ganking, through supporting, whatever, right? Getting everyone ahead has a lot more impact than it does in League, because in League, you can easily 1v5. In Deadlock, 1v6ing is a bit harder. So I hope this makes sense to you guys, but this is, I believe, going to be a fundamental part of Deadlock.
It's a pretty,
there's more players. You have
pretty
to play
basic
for the
take,
team.
but I'm going to expand on
going back to
what he's
that
saying
dual
here.
lane thing, where the dual lane has more impact on all the lanes and the solo lanes. Playing dual lane works perfectly with a 6v6 kind of sense in Deadlock because you get to help the solo lane and the duo lanes.
This is a good point.
I have impact on technically 4 people in the game. There's only one person I don't have impact on, and that's Lash because he's too far
Except
away
for that's not really true, is it? And why is that? Because each of the side lanes has a teleporter that I think is not used enough, at least that I can tell. I think as people learn the game more, people will be using that teleporter more often, and players will learn, to just keep an eye on the minimap. If you see, like, if you're in the far, the far left lane in a solo lane, a good player is going to be, watching every player on the map, enemies and allies. I mean, you're going to be watching the whole map, but in particular, you're going to be watching the opposite side of the map's solo laning enemy, because if they, suddenly maybe they push, you see them push your allied's lane and then they disappear off to the right, there's a good chance, especially if they're very strong and they're very ahead in that lane and they run off to the right, there's a very good chance they're taking the teleporter over to gank you, so little things like that, very good to be aware of.
So I have impact on my own dual lane, I have impact on the other dual lane, and I have impact on the solo lane. Lash only has impact on 2 other people. I have impact on 4 people. Right? This is very
But he does
important.
make a good point, like the Lash definitely has more access to this lane here, and then the teleporter can get here, but the McGuinnis and pocket lane is definitely harder to get to, unless, you always have to account for the speed boosts on the rail system, because that speed boost makes you go extremely fast. And if you're not paying attention, I mean, any player can get anywhere on the map really fast. So always got to keep that in mind for sure. Ideally, anytime if you could, in a perfect world, you would know when any of the enemy heroes backed, right? Or your team would let you know. Like, I'll do this sometimes. If I see my opponent laner back, I'll let the team know over voice comms real quick. Hey, McGuinnis backed, and she hasn't been back in a while, because she could be coming into any lane with a speed boost and for a gank, and easily turn a 2 versus 2 into a 3 versus 2 and change the game. So obvious, right?
Something I believe that will be very important in the future of Deadlock. So enough the yapping. Let's get into the video.
So that's pretty much all I wanted to show you there. But yeah, the other thing about 5 versus 5 and 6 versus 6 is this is what I've really noticed, right? So in League of Legends or Dota, for example, like if you're in a solo lane and you leave your solo lane to go gank another lane, especially you're going to lose your tower very quickly, especially if the enemy is an ADC or some kind of champion that takes towers very quickly. But in this situation, you have 2 duo lanes, so it's pretty reasonable, especially if your lane is ahead, to just leave one of your you can leave your other laner there, your allied laner, to help defend your lane while you go gank around. At least for like a couple minutes, right? Especially if you're laning with a McGuinnis and she has the turrets, like she has the wall, she's very good at just turtling up under tower. In a lot of cases, a McGuinnis can just just hold the tower, especially early game, for indefinitely, right? Which allows you to roam around. You can't really do that, in solo lanes in like League, for example, because they'll just take your tower. You'll lose way too much. Even if you get a kill in another lane, you'll actually be behind probably. If you trade 1 kill for your tower, that's probably not worth it. So that's huge. There's a lot of flexibility. The other thing I was going to say is having that 6th person just makes it a little bit harder to coordinate team-wide like strategy and plans, especially in solo queue or queuing up by yourself and ranked. A lot of times people just don't have the best coordination. Maybe not everyone's listening to mics. People are just doing their own thing. So, in a lot of situations, you just kind of have to hope that everyone is being somewhat cohesive. And I think that as a player, like you can you have to read your team, because you're going to be dealt a different hand of players every game, right? With different mentalities and strategies. Like you could get rolled like a team of players that has 4 split pushing mentality people on it, or 5 other very defensively natured type play styling people, and you have to read that because you want to play somewhere. You have to meet them somewhere in the middle, basically. Of course, you can go do your own thing. Of course, you can go split push, let them do whatever, but you don't want to be too far extreme usually from them, because you just have to read the map, basically. Read your team, kind of have a general gaming sense, right? That you develop over the course of like playing, dozens and hundreds of games, just to get a feel for what your team's doing, what they're capable of, learn power spikes of, your and the enemy's team, and just learn what you can do. Okay. Let's see here. This is an interesting little topic here that I'm personally kind of trying to train myself to remember. But it's the side doors, in the base that are not used very often.
Whenever defending the base, instead of going back to base the normal way where I showed you the wall jump, you can take these side doors. You would be surprised how many people in high MMR games don't generally use these doors. It's kind of crazy, but it does give you a safe route back to base.
So yeah, I mean, that's basically it. I personally, I always forget about these things. They're kind of like out of sight, out of mind, but when used correctly, you can wrap around and, like, say your base is being sieged, you can, loop around the side of them and, kind of flank them. I mean, or get away, escape, all kinds of things. So just kind of shout out to those side doors. They're always there. I don't know if I would call them secret doors. That might be a little too far. Yeah. And then we got these patch notes here. You guys probably have seen these if you're all at all an avid Deadlockite. But so there's obviously all these little changes. A lot of them are just going to change again, here in a couple of weeks when the next patch is released, right? But there is a couple of things here that really stood out to me, that will probably be here to stay, if I had to guess. They might change a little bit, but basically the troopers now take 20% more damage from guardians. So your guardians, your towers have more longevity. They can stand their own ground. You'll have a little bit more safety there. Plus, the walkers are doing more damage by 10%, which is substantial to enemy players. So you can kind of rely on them. But actually, the biggest thing is that the guardians have changed their aggro style to match more what is in line with what I'm used to in other MOBAs like League or Dota, right? So Guardians will now focus their attack on enemy players. If an enemy player shoots a hero and the enemy player is within 15 meters of the Guardian. So 15 meters, that's a good radius. Like, that's a good distance. So no longer, and I thought this was weird, when I first started playing before this change was in effect. Like, I was not used to how able the enemy was to dive you under a tower. It was just a little bit too safe for them. It was like the tower wasn't even there, really, because the tower would just be slowly killing troopers while you were getting just bombarded by these psychotic, like, Viscouses or whatever. So I think this makes sense. I think this makes sense for sure. So you can feel a little bit more safe under tower. You can do little things, like you can kind of force your tower to take aggro on an enemy player when they maybe didn't want to. So in the small, rare circumstances, if the enemy is near your tower and it's not attacking them, but you want it to, and say they throw a grenade or they're shooting over here, you can kind of like jump in front of their bullets for just a second to take a lick of damage, or get in the blast radius of like one of their abilities, so the Guardian will attack them and hope maybe catch them off guard. So interesting. So yeah, let's move on here. So leveling abilities early. This is something that we at least do in League of Legends at like higher elos, right? I'm pretty sure in most games you would do this if you can, if that makes sense. So let's just listen to this here for a second.
Abilities early. I had this game early.
I know he's a little quiet, but it's turned up all the way. Sorry about that.
Assignments was me on Haze and me with a pocket against Shiv and a Viscous. Now, the reason why I wanted to make this video is because I notice a lot of people, they'll kind of like autopilot their unlocks, but I feel like this is the perfect situation because I thought about leveling up my fixation, right? Fixation is usually the first item or the first ability you want to level up on Haze, but I figured since I'm in lane with Bebop, I think it'd be better if I just held my ability point, right? Because if I can get a sleep off and Bebop can hook, then that makes this lane so much easier, right? And it's pretty much a guaranteed kill. So I figured, you know what? All right, I'm gonna save it. One thing you could do as well, if you have a mic, you could always ask the person. You could ask the Bebop like, hey, are you gonna level up hook or are you gonna level up bomb? Like, what do you want to do? Or hey, you should level up your hook. I'll level up my sleep. We can combo. We could do that sort of thing, right? Now, that gives you a lot more flexibility in lane to like really win the lane early, especially into Bebop. There's certain interactions in the game that you can do this when you're in a duo lane. So like something like Vindicta, Tether, and Warden trap. There's I'm trying to think of more, but that's kind of like another big one, Vindicta and Warden. But there's a lot of interactions like that in the game, right? So you just want to be on the lookout for this. Now, another thing as well, Viscous, I'm pretty sure he autopiloted.
So, I hate to keep, some of you will hate that I reference League of Legends, right? People who don't play it, but I know a lot of you are coming from League as well, like me, to Deadlock. So, in League, in higher elos, people will not actually skill their skill until they're like in lane, actually fighting the other people. And League was a little different because you could be subject to an invade where the entire team comes into your jungle as a mob and tries to pick people off before the minions have even spawned, right? You don't get that in this game. I mean, you potentially could do that if everyone switched to one rail and rushed into lane together, that you could do an equivalent of like an early invade. Not an invade, but just like a rush. And that's interesting now that I think about it. That'll be fun to try that out with some pre-made teams. I'm sure someone's tried it. I'll have to look that up. I'll talk about that next game or next podcast. But for many reasons. So like you were saying, like in duo lanes, especially you want to know what your teammate has skilled, and this example was really good. Like if she sleeps him with the dagger, then that lines up a easy hook, right? But maybe if he didn't get hook first, maybe she would consider a different skill. And this is going to vary with every matchup and every like hero that you're playing. Also, the enemy team, although, you're assigned certain lanes at the beginning of the game, people could swap lanes, right? So you may not be laning versus the hero that you might be expecting to when the game first starts. So in that situation, you may want to skill different abilities because different heroes are more susceptible to different skills. Of course, everyone has a weakness and like a strength, right? I think that about covers it.
Because as we'll see here in a second, okay, so Viscous gets hooked instantly, right? And as a response, he's trying to punch up to like escape. But since I leveled up my one ability, we hit the sleep here and we're able to punch him. Now, the thing is, Viscous made the mistake that I'm talking about here, right? Maybe he thought that, oh, well, they have a Haze pocket. I could level up my punch. But that's the thing, right?
Yeah.
You never know until the last second, because a lot of people like to lane swap. So you always want to hold your abilities. I ended up getting the kill here. It wasn't really very clean.
So he's saying maybe he could have gone cube first, mitigated the damage from... Oh, no, Bebop didn't have bomb. He had the hook. Interesting. But yeah, he could have saved himself possibly with the cube.
Yeah, I have my moments. It's... Listen, Hayes' max size is so small. Like, come on, dude. You gotta... But anyway... But that's the general thing, right? If Viscous has cube here, it's not as big of a deal. Like Shiv could probably recover, right? Like if he has cube here, it's not as big of a deal.
Now there are going to be some heroes that pretty much 99% of the time in every situation is going to go the same one skill first every game. But other heroes are different. You have options. You have more defensive skills, more offensive. Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, I know for me, sometimes if I'm fighting a very pokey enemy lane that has like range and the damage on me, maybe I'll level my heal first because I know I'm going to be in a defensive stance, and maybe I'm planning to kind of freeze the lane near my tower and just kind of farm under tower. In this situation, like if they wanted to freeze near the tower, it would be kind of nice with the Bebop, right? Because if he lands a good hook underneath the tower, it's like pretty much a for sure kill. So just all these things to consider. And yeah, that's about it there. Okay, so let's move on. What do I have here? I forgot. That's right. So I was kind of looking through the news for Deadlock, and well, I'll just read it here. Deadlock players demand harsher penalties for serial quitters. Now, just before I started recording this podcast, I was playing a game where, this happened, where a person went 0-2. They died twice in the first 5 minutes, and they just instantly rage quitted. Like they rage quit. I'm assuming it was a rage quit because usually you can tell, right? Usually the person is doing really bad in lane. And then of course, if they're like typing trash or complaining in like all chat, they go 0-2 and then disconnect. It's, it's usually a rage quit. Of course they could have just disconnected, like been having internet problems, but, it's probably doubtful. And so some people have been noticing this. I mean, I notice it maybe a little bit more than when I first started playing Deadlock. But it hasn't been like a very serious issue for me personally. So I wouldn't be one to write this article, honestly. But it is a topic of conversation. This is by Joe Pring, by the way. And he says, Deadlock players have called for tougher punishments for players who purposefully and repeatedly quit matches early. Despite still being in closed alpha, Deadlock has become explosively popular since Valve officially lifted the lid on its upcoming MOBA. Unfortunately, with a huge install base comes a higher prevalence of issues, including cheating and griefing. Such problems are inevitable for a competitive game, but players have registered their hope that they'll be addressed before Deadlock reaches completion. Of course, detailing their experiences on Reddit, one player got a lot of support for the request to increase penalties for those who prematurely leave matches. I love a cooldown when you leave, starting from 2 hours and increasing to like 12, then 24, and probably 48 at max. I disagree. I think this could go up almost indefinitely, because if someone's okay with a 48-hour ban or like waiting time, then it needs to go higher. They're just going to keep doing it again, right? And that's the last thing you want is someone who just comes back every 2 days, ints in a game and disconnects, and then just comes back 2 days later and does it like that. You don't want that. they suggested adding it's beyond frustrating having to queue sometimes 1 to 3 times just to actually get into a match. While many agreed that stricter rules need to be implemented, some argued that for as long as it remains in closed alpha, Valve should be lighter on penalties. Right, so they're saying, yeah, bugs and general instability are to be expected for a title still in active development, as well as disconnects and crashes, in addition to people intentionally leaving early. True, but I mean, in Deadlock, you can just, if your game crashes, you can just rejoin the game, which is great. You know, it'd be really bad. Pretty much any game today it's a competitive multiplayer game needs to have a mechanic where if the game crashes or your power goes out, you can just restart your computer and get back into the match because, I mean, that's just where we're at. We have the technology, right? So I don't know, but actually I did have the VAC, like the anti-cheat thing, pop up on me saying that whatever, what I forget the message, but it's like VAC has detected something, like, and it wouldn't let me back in the game. I restarted my computer, you know, exited Steam, shut off my computer back on, and it still would not let me back in the game. That's happened 2 or 3 times now. So in that situation, you know, that'd be a bummer. But if you're just getting a 5-minute like ban at first, that's not too bad. I've seen more leavers since the NDA loosened than the week before when I got access. It's just people getting their hands on the game and doing what they do best, another user replied. While true that such behavior can be expected, addressing these teething issues early could pay dividends in the long run. Deadlock's pool of players will undoubtedly continue to grow in the weeks and months ahead, making such frustrations more commonplace. Yes, so interesting. We'll keep an eye on it. You know, we'll see how it goes. I haven't really seen. I mean, this stuff definitely is a problem. I wouldn't say it's like super serious, but yeah, and maybe like 15% of my games, especially the unranked games, it seems like. I think, at least in my experience, my ranked games, people at least have an incentive to try a little bit more, so they're a little bit less to just like rage quit or disconnect. I mean, because that's usually what it is, right? I think most of the time what this is, you know, it's a newer player or a bad player who is just getting stomped in lane and they don't want to play it out. You know, they don't know how to play from behind. You know, they don't know how to play and catch up and just kind of like farm jungle, like get whatever they can, be more of a support role, you know, on the team. And so instead of doing that, I mean, they want to be like 10-0 or they just like quit the game, and that really ruins it for everyone. So if you're out there doing that, like, just don't, you know, it's super lame. Play the game. Like, you're on a team with 11 other like conscious breathing people, like, play it out. It's just kind of like, you know, be nice. The only other thing is, like, if your team, since there's no forfeit in this game, right? Which we'll see if they implement one. There has been some talk that they may not implement a forfeit function. So in League of Legends, for example, at 15 minutes, you can vote for a forfeit. And if 4 of your 5 teammates say yes, you can forfeit the game. But some people think that this like creates toxicity because you'll have trolls just spamming the forfeit option, and it's kind of demoralizing, kind of like brings down the morale of the team, you know? If you're someone who's really trying to win the game, you know, and your team is on like teetering, like keep their sanity, which, you know, let's be honest, in a lot of video games, it's hard to find 5, or in Deadlock situation, 6 very stable, solid minds to win the game. And that's what we all want. We want to win the game. So you basically have to expect that, like, I'm always like in comms, this is just me, I'm very nice, try to be supportive and not, I'm trying not to troll my own teammates too hard, because more often than not, it seems like you'll have someone that will just rage quit. They'll get like triggered from the smallest little thing, even if you didn't mean anything, and then they'll just rage quit the game, and then you lost a ranked game, you lost some elo, you just wasted essentially, like, who knows, like a lot of time of your life. So anyway, what I was going to say, like, yeah, people spamming forfeit. Some people think that they won't add the forfeit option because it can create toxicity. You'll have people saying, like, yelling at each other, like, why aren't you forfeiting? This game is lost. And a lot of times, by the way, the game is not lost. Like, people actually learn how to play from behind and catch up. The game's not lost. People just give up because they have low mental, which is a whole nother like podcast episode, or just actually could probably make like 100 podcast episodes on like maintaining good mental in your games, right? It's so important. It's like mechanics and like your aim and like your knowledge of the game are all very important components to winning the game. But I would say half the battle, perhaps, depending on the game, or maybe even more. Like, if you assume half the battle is mental or more, but like, if you trust the matchmaking system, or say in a particular game, you get loaded into a particular game where the matchmaking system did a really good job. So you have very even teams fighting each other, statistically, and skill wise. What's the big thing that's going to alter, the fate of the game is, if one team has solid mental, even if they're like a little bit behind or even a lot behind, in one situation, if they have low mental, they'll just forfeit, leave the game, or they'll just run around the map, like not doing shit, like not really trying. They're not going to leave the game, but they're not really checked in. You know what I mean? They're just like there until your base gets destroyed. And you see that a lot. Or maybe you'll see like trolls get mad. They're just frustrated with themselves because they played bad, or they project that onto another ally. Oh, this ally made me play horribly, so now I'm just gonna run around farming jungle and then not even join team fights when necessary. You know what I mean. So the team with a stronger mental wins games. That's how you do it. I would much rather be a little bit worse mechanically, not have the best aim and not be like the quickest, like lightning fast, like, clicker, but have a stronger mental than my opponent every day, like every single day. And you'll notice as you climb elo, for the most part, this is generalization, higher elo people have better mentals. They're more stable. They're more sane. Okay? They know how to not get tilted when they say they die 3 times in lane, like before 10 minutes. That's really bad, right? But in a lot of situations, you can turn it around and come back. Especially in Deadlock, you have the urn, which is a huge comeback mechanic. The enemy team will almost always make mistakes. They're going to make mistakes. And you'd be surprised how you can come back from like giant deficits. And I'll tell you what, winning those games when you're coming back from super far behind are the best victories. Those are some of the best victories. It just feels good. It's a good story. Our team was 100,000 spirits behind and we won. It was a 50-minute game, but we won. Anyways, I think you know what I'm saying. One more point, professional esports teams have, that's why they hire like psychologists or like mental counselors for their team members to like get them in the right state of mind, to be positive and all that, anyways, so that's that. We'll see where this goes. Yeah, I'm all for like penalties. Like if you're going to go into games and they can track everything, right? Like if you have someone that's just leaving the game and disconnecting permanently for like 5 out of the last 7 games they've played, like penalize them and make it progressive, make it exponential. Like I'd rather it be harsher than not harsh enough. That's my opinion, Of course, everyone doesn't make mistakes, so the first couple of penalties shouldn't be very big because lots of people have just really bad internet. So there's that, but they have metrics to tell pretty well, like is someone trolling, So yeah, that's pretty much it, guys. Sorry about that. I wanted to thank you for watching. If you are someone who is interested in podcasts like this, I am considering adding another personality, getting another co-host, a hostess, or just guests, Again, I want to have some, I'd love to have like different coaches on, it'd be cool if I could get like pro players or just different voices in the community to talk about things, educate people, go over VODs, like all that kind of stuff. So anyways, let me know in comments, like what are you looking for? What would really get you to watch this show or a podcast like this? Like what interests you? Any areas of improvement that you could recommend to me, or just let me know what's up. Say hi. I appreciate it, guys. And until next time.